Hey, folks, Erick Stakelbeck here. Welcome to the Watchman Newscast live stream. We are closing out a very eventful week, needless to say, obviously, here in the United States with the election result. Literally, certainly a country changing, but a world changing event with Donald Trump winning the election in resounding landslide fashion. Already, we're seeing major implications in the Middle East and around the world that we need to talk about. And we also need to talk about on the 86th anniversary of Kristallnacht, that horrible pogrom in Germany 86 years ago in 1938. Now, once again, we have pogroms in Europe 86 years later. Last night in Amsterdam, in the Netherlands, a rampage by Arab Muslims against Israeli Jews who were attending a soccer match there. Folks, the scenes, you may have seen clips of this. You may have seen the video footage. It made me sick to my stomach. Open violence in the streets against Jews, against Israelis in particular, a heinous, heinous act. Thank God no one was killed, but dozens of Israelis were severely wounded, and dozens of these perpetrators are in custody. It was open season, literally, as Geert Wilders, a top Dutch politician, said, this was Jew hunting on the streets of Amsterdam in the very heart of Western Europe. In 2024, it's really happening, folks. So we need to break that down and the implications of that. But first, this assassination plot against President Trump. You may say, which one? Sad to say, but good question. You saw the title, The Iranian Regime. Now, we've talked about this really for months. We've heard rumblings now, correct that, not only for months. A year and a half ago, almost 2 years ago, winter 2023, we heard rumblings that Iran's leadership wanted to assassinate not only Donald Trump, but former members of his administration. Why? Well, they ordered the takeout of Qasem Soleimani, the Iranian terror master. And not only that, Iran saw how tough Trump was on them during his first term, and they were petrified that he would come into office once again. Guess what? On Tuesday, November 5th, he did exactly that. At least he was elected. He takes office on January 20th after the inauguration. He's Iran's worst nightmare is Donald Trump. So over the past few years, and it seemed to intensify over the past few months, they've been plotting to assassinate him. I mean, it's not just me saying it. The Biden-Harris administration, which is no friend of Donald Trump, has confirmed this. Yes, Iran is trying to assassinate Donald Trump. And we've got the proof today that, look, it's not just some kind of media clamor or some made-up thing. Again, the Biden-Harris administration is no fan to Donald Trump, number one. And number two, has looked to appease Iran at every turn. And yet, today, the Biden-Harris Department of Justice says it has thwarted an Iranian plot to kill President Donald Trump in the weeks leading up to the election. I mean, it was almost an open secret, not so secret, that Iran wanted to do this. And yet, we can go on and on about this maybe on another live stream, but the lack of Secret Service protection with the proliferation of threats against Donald Trump. July 13th, of course, September with the plot in Florida, thwarted by the grace of God. We'll talk more about that in a minute. A miracle. And Iran was among the plotters as well with their own separate plot. The Department of Justice, a criminal complaint. I'm just reading this straight off foxnews.com. I'm going to get all the details right here. A criminal complaint filed in federal court in New York City says an unnamed official in Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guards Corps had asked a man by the name of Farhad Shakeri, 51 years old, from Iran, back in September of this year, to, quote, focus on surveilling and ultimately assassinating former president of the United States, now future, Donald J. Trump. There are few actors in the world that pose as grave a threat to the national security of the United States as does Iran, said Attorney General Merrick Garland in a statement. Well, Merrick, if that's the case, why does your administration continue to appease Iran and restrain Israel from striking back at Iran? But I digress, and Iran's proxies. He goes on to say, the Justice Department has charged an asset of the Iranian regime who was tasked by the regime to direct a network of criminal associates to further Iran's assassination plots against its targets, including President Donald Trump. We have also charged and arrested 2 individuals who we allege the U.S. government were recruited as part of that network to silence and kill on U.S. soil an American journalist who has been a prominent critic of the regime. Wow. We will not stand for the Iranian regime's attempts to endanger the American people and America's national security. Oh, really? Then what are you going to do? They're plotting to kill a former and future president of the United States. What are you going to do, Biden-Harris administration? Does it get any worse than that? What are you going to do about it? The Justice Department says Shakari, who remains at large and is believed to be living in Iran, immigrated to the United States as a child and was deported around 2008 after serving time in prison for a robbery conviction. He has informed law enforcement that he was tasked on October 7, 2024, with providing a plan to kill President-elect Donald J. Trump. Trump was referred to in court filings as victim number 4. During his meetings with the IRGC, the Islamic Revolutionary Guards Corps of Iran, Shakari was directed to provide a plan to kill Trump. And they assessed that, wow, the IRGC would pause its plan to kill Trump because they thought he was going to lose. And after he lost, it would be easier to assassinate him. He was also tasked with surveilling 2 Jewish American citizens residing in New York City, offered a lot of money for it. Wow. And 2 other men living in New York have been arrested in connection with their alleged involvement in this plot, in a plot to kill a U.S. citizen of Iranian origin. So there's several legs to this. And I don't want it all to get lost in the weeds. I'm just reading you the details there of a pretty intricate plot that, thank God, never got off the ground. But what are your thoughts on that? Number one, I think the big question is, and we have such an educated audience here, feel free to opine in our chat. But I think the big takeaway for me is, okay, it is now established by the current U.S. government that a foreign actor, the Iranian regime, has been actively attempting to assassinate a sitting, soon to be sitting, former sitting, and soon to be sitting once again, U.S. president. There must be a response. I'm not talking about an invasion of Iran before you say warmonger. That's not what I'm saying. Sanctions, heavy sanctions, something, anything? Because the Biden-Harris administration, President Trump put heavy sanctions in force, and the Biden-Harris administration backed off from that, which was a massive mistake. It only emboldened Iran. It gift-wrapped them with billions of dollars that they used to prop up their nuclear and missile programs and the terror apparatuses of Hamas, Hezbollah, and the Houthis, and others. So the soft, appeasing way clearly didn't work. But that has been the line of this current U.S. administration. So now what are they going to do? That's my big question. It's been established. It's official. We now have the DOJ. We have indictments. This really happened. They're plotting to kill President Trump, the Iranian regime. So two halves to it, I guess, folks. On one hand, what does the current U.S. government do, if anything, between now and January 20th about this? And perhaps more interesting for us and perhaps more frightening for Iran, what does the next administration do? I don't know, call me crazy. Donald Trump seems to have a long memory on stuff like this. I actually asked him about this. I interviewed Donald Trump just about 2.5 weeks ago, right before the election. You saw it here in the live stream, my exclusive sit down with the 45th and 47th president of the United States, Donald J. Trump. And I asked him about this Iranian plot against his life. And he said, look, the bottom line is they can't have a nuclear weapon. He kept any response to the assassination plots close to the vest, smartly. But I can tell you that there's no way they'll acquire the bomb. Not that Israel would let them, by the way, in the first place, But if Donald Trump's in office, Iran's not getting the bomb. And can anyone watching me now, honestly say that if Joe Biden or Kamala Harris were in office, that Iran would never get the bomb? That the U.S. under that leadership, I say with quotes, so-called leadership, that they were really all in on stopping Iran? And I might get a commenter here say, but they said they were going to stop Iran. Okay, there's one thing to say it, but when there's no teeth behind it and your enemy knows there's no teeth behind it, then it's just words, as Barack Obama once said. And that was another guy who didn't follow through and whose red lines were crossed continuously by America's adversaries. But with Trump, Iran knows he means business, and they fear him. And the adversaries of the free world right now are on notice that there's a new sheriff in town. Now, you may not like Donald Trump. You may say, Stakelbeck, oh, you're all wrong. But guess what? From 2017 to 2021, when Donald Trump was in office, there were no wars, no major wars like we see right now. There was not a war in Europe. There were not multiple wars in the Middle East. And that's not by coincidence, folks. Peace through strength is really a thing. And Donald Trump epitomized that during his time in office. No one knows that better than Iran, with all the moves he made against the Iranian regime, taking out Soleimani, as I mentioned, pulling out that disastrous Iran nuclear deal, designating Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guards Corps as a terror organization, recognizing Israeli sovereignty over the Golan Heights, recognizing Jerusalem as Israel's capital, moving the U.S. embassy to Jerusalem. Oh, and by the way, crushing ISIS. Promise made, promise kept. All of that made the world stand and take notice. Also striking the Assad regime in Syria after it used chemical weapons on its own people. All of this made the world take notice. And you see it already. You see the effects. Already, Hamas is saying, we want a ceasefire. Qatar is saying it's going to kick Hamas off Qatari soil. They've ordered Hamas to leave Doha. All of a sudden, the bad guys are kind of trying to make nice. Because again, they know there's a new sheriff in town who means business. The days of Biden, Harris, appeasement, and weakness are over. By the way, Donald Trump also planned to withdraw U.S. troops from Afghanistan. But the way he planned to do it looked a lot different than how it went down in August 2021, needless to say, which was one of the greatest I'm sad to say this as an American, one of the greatest embarrassments in U.S. history, that Afghanistan withdrawal. I don't believe that would have happened, certainly, in that manner. I don't believe Putin would have invaded Ukraine. And I don't think October 7th happens if Trump's in office. And I say that without hesitation. So we shall see. I personally think we're going to break this down more, this assassination plot, the ramifications, the modern day pogrom on the anniversary of Kristallnacht in Amsterdam, pogroms returning to Europe. But let me say real quick that I think, and I said this on my show, Stakelbeck Tonight. Hey, if you like the YouTube channel, you love our nightly show on TBN every weeknight, 7:30 p.m. Eastern Time, with a re-air at 10:30 p.m. Eastern Time on TBN, the world's largest Christian television network. I said tonight that on the monologue, and you'll see it tonight, that I think we're in the midst here of a move of God in America. And we have viewers from around the world, I know. But what happens here in the United States, like it or not, has profound ramifications for the entire world. Everyone knows that, who's intellectually honest. They recognize that. And I really think we've seen a shift in this country. And there is a move here where I think we could see revival. I think we could see the body of Christ, great things happen, and a national renewal. Because everyone talked about how divided the United States was. Folks, guess what? Just a quick aside here. This country is much more united than any of us living here thought. I can tell you that. And why do I say that? The election results Tuesday night. And it may infuriate some people listening who say Donald Trump's the devil, he's terrible. Well, here are the facts. That Trump, he must be doing something right. Because across literally every demographic in the United States, or 99% of demographics, we're talking working class whites, African Americans, Hispanics, Asian Americans, Jews in swing states, Native Americans, Muslims. He won Dearborn. Donald Trump won Dearborn, Michigan. Generation Z, young people across the board. Significant increases among all of those demographics. Sounds like unity to me. Black, white, Hispanic, young, older. My generation, Generation X, 52% of whom, more than any age group, went for Donald Trump. And I think that's not a coincidence, in that if you grew up, if you're a child of the 80s like me, and you came of age during the 1980s, then you saw America at its apex. You saw a period of prosperity, patriotism, unity. I mean, Ronald Reagan won 49 states in 1984. The country had a shared common purpose and vision. And I joked around today, I said in the 80s, we were raised on Reagan, Rambo, and wrestling. And you know what? We know how great, in all seriousness, we know how great it could be in this country when it's united, when all cylinders are firing at the same time, and when we're one nation under God and we put God first. The 90s was a time of prosperity, but the moral character began to unravel. And yes, that matters. And we saw the decline continue into the 2000s, to the point where we had little kids being mutilated, and with the full approval of adults. State-sanctioned child abuse with the gender reassignment madness. And I think my generation, Generation X, which has been called kind of the silent generation in a lot of ways, and they don't get off the couch, the slacker generation, whatever. But we're the generation who, number one, knew when it was great in this country. Number two, we grew up during the Cold War, and we saw Reagan prevail in the Cold War. We don't like communism and socialism very much. And I think it got to the point where Generation X said, enough is enough. This is insanity. Keep your hands off our kids. And we're getting out. We're getting activated. I was always activated, as you know, but many of my co-Generation Xers maybe weren't at times, but man, did they speak up like lions. I said a Gen X sleeping giant was awoken on November 5th. And that the unity, there is a united American response, and God willing, we see it in Europe, where the American people in large numbers, look, he won the Electoral College overwhelmingly. Trump won the popular vote by over 5 million votes. I broke down the demographics. Look at blue states, New York, Illinois, California, New Jersey, Democrat bastions. He didn't win those states, but man, he got closer than any Republican has in a long time. And those states are gradually becoming redder and redder outside of the major cities, the major urban populations. Look at California from 2020 to 2024. Folks, it's amazing what's going on. Sean Foyt wrote today on X that we don't have blue states in America. We have blue cities. And I think that's an accurate assessment. My home state of Pennsylvania, I mean, it's deep red except for Philly and Pittsburgh and Harrisburg. That's it. So it's really amazing what's going on here in the United States. And that California map, Google it if you can, check it out online. It's pretty amazing to see what's going on here. And again, it was a repudiation of the radical left. There's no other way to see it. The last 4 years were madness here in the United States. When you have men playing women's sports and going into girls' locker rooms. I have 2 daughters. That ain't happening. And it was madness. It was insanity. And thank God, you know, it reminds me in 1 Kings, Elijah thinks he's all alone. He's on the run from Jezebel, which is ironic. He just won this great victory against the prophets of Baal. Then automatically he's running for his life. And he says to God, take me now, kill me. I'm all alone. There's nothing to live for, basically. And God says, no, Elijah, take heart. I still have 7,000 men in Israel who have not bent their knee to Baal. You're not alone, God said. There's many more like you. I'm raising them up. And anyone here, in America at least, who felt completely alone, and you might feel this way in Europe right now, Africa, wherever you live. We have viewers from around the world here on the Watchman live stream. But you may have felt all alone. And then on Tuesday night, you found out, man, I'm anything but alone. And people who I thought I may have nothing in common with, a different demographic or something like that, or an age group or a generation, man, they see the world like I do. And they were fed up too. And they knew this stuff was crazy. To open our southern border wide open and let 12 million people at least into the country in a 4-year span is insanity. No nation in history, well, other than Western Europe right now, more than that in a second, but other than the Western world, let's say, has done that. It's cultural and national suicide. And that all came to a screeching halt on November 5th. And again, I'm optimistic that good things can happen. And God gave us a reprieve as the United States. To me, it's miraculous. And you might say, Donald Trump's a bad guy. Okay. You know what? God uses some of the most unlikely vessels. Cyrus, Jehu, Samson. The Bible is filled with these examples. And I believe 100% he has his hand on Donald Trump. He spared his life in Butler, PA, spared his life from various plots. And through the madness, the indictments, the impeachments, the evil that was done to him with wicked intentions, him and his family, the mainstream media targeting him unjustly, and he's still standing. How do you explain that? The man's a fighter. You may say, I don't like him. I don't like his tweets. Okay. What about his policies? And you can't deny the man's a fighter. He doesn't need this. He's 78. He's a billionaire. He could be off on a yacht someplace with his grandkids, enjoying life and not being attacked every day. He does it because he loves his country. I think there's going to be some really good ramifications of that. And he's talked recently, he talked about it in his acceptance speech Tuesday night. People believe that God spared my life so I could turn this country around. He can use me to turn this country around. He's talked about returning America to one nation under God. He's not Jesus. He's not the Messiah. We get that. Jesus isn't on the ballot. But you know what? That's a guy who did more for the body of Christ during his first term than I've seen any president do. And every time I see him and there's Christian leaders praying for him, he's accepting that prayer. Whereas Kamala Harris was kicking Christians out of her rally for yelling, Jesus is Lord. Literally said, you're at the wrong rally. We could go on. But I say all this to say, and this is related to the topic at hand here for this live stream, the assassination attempts against Trump. I say all this to say, we're at a pivot point here in history. And, you know, there's been a lot of darkness and evil has been on the march. We've documented it here on the live stream. But I think for the first time in maybe a long time, some good things are happening. I look at Israel over the past several weeks. I see Hamas and Hezbollah smashed. I see the Iranian regime more vulnerable than ever before. Now I see this landslide victory, conservative victory this week. And I'm saying, okay, what is God doing here? And the potential for Bibi and Trump to work together once again come January, assuming Bibi's still in office, which I think he will be, but you never know. Israeli politics are so crazy. But we're on the verge of perhaps some good things where evil is put to flight. And I think everyone who over the past 4 years was so nervous here in America, and you're dealing with this in Europe, I know, and Canada, people were afraid of being accused of toxic masculinity or racism, fascism, xenophobia, all the rest. I think the attitude now is, you know what? You people are out of your minds, and I'm not a fascist, and we're not going to take it anymore. We spoke with a complete, resounding, unified voice on November 5th. We repudiated your madness. We're turning the page. It's a new day. Like Ronald Reagan said, it's morning in America once again. I really think we're there. But this is all great optimism and encouragement that I feel. But folks, I can say, if we squander this, we've got a golden opportunity. God gave us another chance. It's his mercy. This was his mercy. I don't know if a lot of people even realize the disaster we averted on Tuesday night and what it could have been with the radical left taking power. And that was the most radical left-wing ticket we've ever seen, that Harris-Walz ticket. I hope my fellow countrymen and women realize this was God's hand of grace and mercy on our nation, and that we act accordingly. We're thanking him and we're advancing the kingdom. We're doing his work. That's the key here. It's still, I've said this throughout, it is still revival or bust in America. We could have great political movements, and some political solutions are better than others, certainly. But at the end of the day, without the Lord at the center of it, it'll eventually all collapse. So I'm praying for Trump to be like a Josiah, to tear down the many high places that we have here in the United States today. And I think it's going to have a ripple effect around the world. Already, you see tyrants saying, uh-oh, he's back. Trump's back. And that's a good thing. He's a bit unpredictable on the world stage when it comes to our adversaries. That's a great thing. They don't know what he's going to do. And man, rather than the Biden-Harris administration telegraphing constantly saying, we're not going to do this, it's going to be a limited strike, and we told Israel we want a proportionate response, et cetera, et cetera. You don't know what Trump's going to do. Man, call me crazy. In a time like this, when we have a gathering storm against the free world, Russia, China, Iran, North Korea, and others, how good is it to have a strong leader who keeps the bad guys guessing? So a lot on my mind and on every American I talk to's mind after the events of this week. Just, again, a colossal repudiation of the left. And again, look at the map. There's some, by county here in the United States, from coast to coast, it's a sea of red. And there's these blue enclaves. And it's the big cities, the big urban centers, surrounded by just red everywhere. And to me, it's just so heartening and so encouraging that, man, everyone, the majority of Americans were feeling the same way. They were fed up with the craziness, and they spoke in unison on November 5th. It's just been a joy to see. It really has. As someone who loves my country, that God's not done with us yet. We've got another chance here. God has given us another chance. I think of Hezekiah. God gave Hezekiah 15 more years to live. I hope we have 15 and more here in the United States. Whatever the case, he's given us a reprieve and a second chance here. As an American, I hope we make the most of it. And part of that is keeping Donald Trump alive against these repeated assassination attempts by the likes of the Iranian regime. So we'll see if the Biden-Harris administration does anything, if there's any consequences for that. And more importantly, perhaps we'll see if Donald Trump does anything when he gets into office and what the ramifications will be there. Folks, it's going to be very, very interesting to see this play out over the next few months. Iran is on the run right now, and they have never been, again, more vulnerable, and they know it, and that's why they have targeted Trump, because they know when he comes in, the Times of Israel has a great report today. I'll read to you real quick. When he gets in office, the maxim he's planning to renew his maximum pressure strategy against Iran. They're going to be squeezed. People who are close to the president, who have been briefed on his plans, said, look, sanctions are going to be back. He's going to squeeze Iran's oil industry. Diplomatically, financially, the Iranian regime will be isolated. He could give Israel the green light to strike Iran's nuclear facilities, unless Israel does it before Trump gets into office. Remember, Biden-Harris, that's a lame duck administration right now. And Iran's quaking in its boots. And I can't say I'm sad about that. But these plots cannot go unanswered. So we'll see if this current administration does anything. And also what cannot go unanswered. And by the way, if you like what you're hearing and you like current events, breaking news from the Middle East, Israel, why it affects you from an unapologetically biblical perspective, be sure to subscribe to the Watchman News channel right here on YouTube. Click the notification bell so you get alerts every time a new video is posted. We just passed 1 million subscribers. Hard to believe what a year it's been, and we've got great things in store for the months, days, and years, God willing, to come. But another thing that cannot be countenanced is a modern-day pogrom on the streets of Europe. Some details on last night, if you did not see this. This was some of the most disturbing footage I have seen in some time. Fans of the Maccabi Tel Aviv soccer team, which had a match in Amsterdam in the Netherlands, were set upon by mobs, reportedly of Arab Muslim men. And it's a different kind of Europe these days. Open borders has led to a change of the culture and the character of Western Europe. And you have places like London, Paris, Amsterdam, Berlin, with large Muslim populations. And that has been side by side, sadly, in these cities and countries with an increase in anti-Semitism. It's Islamic anti-Semitism in these cases, combined with radical left-wing anti-Semitism. We've seen the same combination on American college campuses, although I think that might be about to come to a screeching halt come January 20th, based on some of the things President Trump has said. But here's what we had in Amsterdam. Let me just pull this up. Amsterdam has banned demonstrations for 3 days after Israeli soccer fans were beaten and injured in violent clashes in the city overnight, which Dutch authorities condemned Friday as anti-Semitic. Dutch police said they had launched a major investigation into multiple incidents following the Europa League soccer game Thursday night between Israel's Maccabi Tel Aviv and Dutch team Ajax. Amsterdam's mayor said criminals on scooters searched the city in search of Maccabi Tel Aviv supporters in, quote, hit and run attacks. And you can see the footage, folks, online. I mean, Jews being beaten on the ground by mobs of men surrounding them, outnumbered, of course, cheap shots left and right, gang attacks. And the mayor of Amsterdam, a little too late, says, this is a terrible moment for our city. I am very ashamed of the behavior that was shown last night. I'd say so. Amsterdam authorities said Friday morning that 5 injured Israeli soccer fans have since been released from the hospital, and 20 to 30 other people, 20 to 30 were I said seriously, lightly injured, thank God. I said seriously earlier. In total, 63 individuals were arrested and 10 remain in custody. What, the other 53 were let go? Amsterdam has now implemented several additional security measures in the wake of Thursday's unrest. A ban on demonstrations in the city, as I mentioned, was implemented until Sunday. The mayor also announced a ban on face-covering clothing and carrying objects that could lead to disturbances of public order. Could that mean Palestinian flags? Because some in these mobs were waving Palestinian flags and chanting pro-Palestinian slogans as they hunted down Jews in what was clearly a coordinated attack. They pre-planned this. It was premeditated. It wasn't spontaneous. Hundreds of Maccabi fans were ambushed and attacked in Amsterdam. Brutal beatings, chasing people, beating them in Europe because they were Jewish, because they're in specific Israeli, many of them. In Europe in 2024, Kristallnacht was November 9th and 10th on 1938. This happened on November 9th. Yeah. Or I'm sorry, 8th. Coinciding with that 86th anniversary of Kristallnacht. Doesn't seem coincidental there, right? That same demonic spirit from 86 years ago reared its head again in the Netherlands, where Anne Frank lived, of all people. I mean, talk about history. Europe is in very dire straits. And let me say again that there was a dark shadow descending upon the Western world. And the United States would have been enveloped in it had Kamala Harris and Tim Walz won. Their radical left agenda, along with Europe, socialism, secularism, separation, it would have spelled disaster for the United States. Instead, the American people chose faith, family, and freedom. And I'm praying for that American revival. I'm praying that this can be a signal to Europe, that America once again can become that shining city on a hill, and that Europe can say, wow, they're doing it right. And maybe we need to make these changes. Secure our borders, close them when needed, get our act together. But folks, nothing will improve in the long term for Europe or the United States or the world if there's not a collective turning back to God. It is revival or bust at the end of the day. Whew, a lot going on. Pray for those people in Amsterdam who were attacked. Pray for a hedge of protection over Donald Trump, that these plots all come for naught, that they go nowhere, these continued assassination plots. And now the Iranian regime, it's fully exposed now what they've planned. We live in momentous times, prophetic times, Bible times. We've got a front row seat for it, so keep it right here on the live stream. If anything big happens over the weekend, I will come to you live. So be sure to subscribe, click that notification bell so you get alerts for such a time as this. Let's keep it all in prayer. Until next time, have a great weekend. God bless you. And remember, never Hold your peace.
Hey everyone, thanks for checking out the Watchman Newscast. Make sure you hit the subscribe button so you never miss an upload, and tap the bell icon so you're notified every time a new video is posted. And don't forget to share your thoughts, insights, and comments below. Thanks for watching. We'll see you back here tomorrow.